Thank you.
Thanks, no,
So good to see you.
kind words. You know, after I heard Jeremy talk, it is quite an act to follow, to be honest. It's was anybody there at Wembley Stadium a few weeks ago with Elton John? In his big concert that he put on. I asked Jeremy how many people participated globally in Peace one day. He doesn't know. He's become so big, he says, I need McKinsey to find the answer. But, you know, soon it will be a few billion, and this is what I want to talk about. I just came here from Atlanta, and I was at the airport waiting for my plane, and there was an engineer sitting there, an electrician, and an economist, the 3 E's. So this electrician said, we have the oldest profession. So I got interested, so I sneak a little closer to find out what they're talking about. He says, if you look at the book of Genesis, and we created the earth and there was light, it was actually us who put the cables down. So the engineer said, I don't think so. I think we have the oldest profession. Because before you lay the cables down, the earth had to be created, and we, out of chaos, created order. And that's what engineers do. And then the economist said, you are all wrong. I have the oldest profession. Who do you think created chaos in the first place? So, anyway, first of all, before I do this, last year when I talked in Zurich, David was so kind to make a baby, so we congratulated him on that. He's decided not to do this year, but I do want to congratulate Kate and David again for putting on such a wonderful event. As you know better than I do, they're awesome people and they're changing the world just like you do. Today I just want to use my short time to talk 2 things that I think are important. I really want to talk about 2 words. One is power and the other one is hope. As simple as that. It's about your power to influence things. And hope for all of us for a better world. A better world that I think you can make a difference to. Every day when you're watching the news, when you listen to some of the other speakers, you're confronted with a lot of things you don't want to hear. The poverty, the climate change, youth unemployment, and many of the other things, the resource scarcity, civil unrest, every day on the news now, and the list goes on. Many are wondering, in fact, how we are going to solve all these challenging issues that this earth is facing right now. Now, what many people forget is there is a fundamental shift in the world, and one of the reasons I'm here, which is the power of the youth, which is an enormous thing. And the other thing that is an enormous shift is the power of technology. And I'm convinced that if you put these 2 together, you can actually get to the solutions of many of these challenges that you're so well aware of. In fact, many young people have done great things in this world well before us all. Alexander the Great became king of Macedon when he was only 20 years old. And by the time that he was 30, he had created the largest empire at that time in the ancient world. Undefeated in battle he was, and probably one of history's most successful commanders. Joan of Arc, that some of you might know, she actually led the French army siege of Orleans at the age of 19. And for the ones that don't know, she was a woman. Christabel Pankhurst was another woman in the UK, only at the age of 23, when she co-founded the movement to let women vote for the first time in the UK. And then in more recent times, you have people like Richard Branson, who started Virgin when he was 20 years old, or Mark Zuckerberg, who did the same when he was 20, or Steve Jobs, who was 20 or 21 when he founded Apple. What these people have in common is not that they are more gifted than any of us or that they are more educated, often actually to the contrary. But what they have in common is they started a movement or a network that inspired others to join. They were all committed to building a different kind of future. In fact, they had a passion for a better world based on dignity and respect and based on the interest of the common good before their own interest. A simple passion to make a lasting difference. Now, I believe that the power of people to make a difference has exponentially multiplied because of digital technology starting to connect us all. That's very obvious, and you get it. That's the good thing. You look at Facebook, who just passed 1 billion users. Who would ever thought that? We have now over 2.2 billion users connecting on the internet. That's 33% of the current world population. In fact, 1.5 billion users using the social network, and the list goes on. How can we galvanize these people? How can we organize our activities and broadcast our actions to the world to create this multiplier, to create this movement? And increasingly it is possible. Some people think that by the year 2030, there will be 50 billion connected devices on this world. In fact, the rate of mobile phone issuing and use is going up faster than the population now. So it's happening as we speak, but we're not fully leveraging this. Social movements have been at the origin of some of the dramatic things we've seen recently. Take the Arab Spring as an example, or Occupy Wall Street, or in the city where I live, unfortunately, the London riots. In Egypt, it just took 17 days to overthrow a regime. That was always used in employment, corruption, volatile food prices. Social media made it possible. We organize on Facebook, we communicate with each other on Twitter, and we show the world what we do on YouTube. Young people and social media were at the center of all these events. Just look at a second here from Egypt. There's absolutely no doubt that social media is shifting the power to ordinary people who are increasingly, obviously, using it to challenge a system that they feel increasingly is unfair or not working to them. And that's what you see here. But all too often, these challenges result, unfortunately, in destruction or conflict. They're not also always leading to a better solution. It brings down the old system, easier to do, but it doesn't always build a better one. So I want to applaud your enthusiasm, I want to applaud your commitments, and acknowledge, obviously, your generation's skills in using these digital and social networks to change the world. But I also want to use this opportunity to challenge you to make the current system, or to remake the current system, which is called capitalism, a little bit of a better system, to prove actually that it can work. It was a former Prime Minister in the UK called Winston Churchill who said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the other ones that have been invented. I've traveled the world. We are in about 200 countries. We sell our products to consumers nearly everywhere. And I've come to believe as well that capitalism could have that same. It's the worst form of running countries or businesses, except for all the other ones that have been invented. But it's also clear that it has shortcomings. For sure, it has lifted 500 million people out of poverty, has given us access to education. I wouldn't be standing here were it not for it. But it has also shown that it doesn't benefit everybody, and it also shown that it is showing some shortcomings, especially after some of the things we've seen, like the 2008 financial crisis. So we have a challenge together. We have a unique opportunity to show that we can make it work. Not a day too early, and that is what I want to challenge you to. Not through barricades, not through placards or any other things, but from the inside, creating just simply a better way for business to do business, to use the digital and social media to start new business models, to initiate social movements in ways that create opportunities for others to get involved and drive that positive social change that we all want, to become part of these movements that Jeremy just so eloquently explained. I've always been fascinated by the power of youth, who, by the way, are 50% of the population in the emerging markets. And interestingly, they're 100% of the future generation. That is what inspires me to come here to One Young World. I have 3 young boys myself that are in their 20s. Yet I believe that we don't always harness the power of all these people, of all these young people, and that we often exclude them from the most important issues that need to be talked. I've been in climate change talks or in Rios or in some other things, but the youth often don't get the seat at the table that they deserve. Now let's just look at 2 extraordinary young people who are changing things. The first one I came across again was in the UK, a guy called Jamal Edwards. He's only 15 years old, he lives in London. And he's turned his hobby actually in one of the UK's leading youth media channels. And guess from where he does it? From his bedroom. Here we go.
Now I'm living them correct here, sitting in the SB. If you need a bar, then get me. Educate yourself, see it's not the money you make. It's compulsory, some are calling it poetry. SB TV.
You never catch me. Explosive. Style, don't think I'm a blow. I get therapy now.
SBTV. SBTV was in, man. I rise up, like a train. Choo choo, go hard, go faster. Stack peas every day. I rise up, like a tractor. I rise up, like a plane. Choo choo, down the road. Women more rock.
It's probably soon the biggest radio station in the UK, generating employment, success, anything you can imagine. Another example I found was here in the US called Carrot Mob. Some of you might be aware of it. Just started in 2008 by a guy called Brent Skulkin. Brent had a very simple idea using the flash mob principle. Instead of boycotting products you don't like, he encouraged people to boycott products that make a positive difference. Over 250 campaigns he's run, where people vote with their wallets for local stores that are prepared to implement more environmental commitments. Now I like this carrot mod, and we in Unilever has worked or started to work with him to see if we can scale this, because it's so easy to protest or to be negative about things you don't like. But this is a very productive, positive thing to actually vote with your money for positive change. So if we can use our collective power to introduce democracy instead of autocracy, and reward good behavior instead of punish the bad behavior, then just imagine what we can apply or what we can achieve if we apply that same energy and enthusiasm in solving some of the world's biggest social and environmental challenges. That's just awesome. But in order to do that, we simply need your help. Last time I was talking to you in Zurich, we talked about this VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Never have we seen more of that than now. It's very unsettling, very difficult to steer your companies as well. In fact, the average tenure of a CEO is now less than 3 years. Now, since we've talked, the world has changed, but we haven't seen much change for the better. The economic volatility actually has increased, and the European problem a part of the country that I live is starting to affect now other parts of the world. We talked about the toppling of regimes like in Egypt or in Libya, but now we're seeing every night on television a very dreadful spectacle playing out in Syria. We talked about the financial crisis and the financial measures that needed to be taken, but we soon woke up to the rude awakening of the LIBOR scandal. And then we talked about the governments not being able anymore to internalize these global challenges, becoming increasingly short-term focused. And then we saw a very disappointing outcome on the Rio +20. As a result, growth is not coming, unemployment continues to be challenging, and particularly youth unemployment remains at unacceptably high levels. In fact, in many countries now, a third to half of the young population cannot find jobs and are increasingly disengaged in the process. Spain or Greece, countries I visit, Southern Europe in total, youth unemployment is now up to 50%, even risking, in my opinion, a serious challenge to democracy in the first place. If you get generations that are excluded from the workforce, or people that have never seen their parents work, what do they think about the system they're living in? As one of the young world leaders told me last Monday when I was talking to her, how can you love this world if you have huge college loans, cannot afford a housing, or find it difficult to get a good job? If too many people feel the system doesn't work for them, or if they feel rejected by the system, they're going to rebel. The ecosystem is simply not in equilibrium. And that is the part of capitalism we all need to work on to change. Young people themselves, I know you are crying out for change and want to be part of the solution. Take a look at this little film that we put together for Rio when we went there. It's called A Date with History. It is all young people across the world demanding the change that we're all desperately looking for. Have a look.
Today, I want to tell you a story.
I ask you to listen.
Now more than ever, we need to connect the dots.
This is about our future. Humanity has the power to make or break the circle of life.
We must act now.
A world where we don't take our resources or each other for granted.
I want a future where no one goes to bed hungry at night.
A world where most of our energy comes from renewable resources.
A world with enough clean water, food, and clean energy.
Where global nations agree on sustainable actions.
I am ready to bring a change.
I want to live in a truly global world.
We are all collectively responsible.
It's time to look after and be inspired by the world around us. It's time for leaders to lead.
Buon volo and pensiero.
The time for action is now.
Leaders of the world, this is the future I want.
You know, Brittany Trilford, she was 17 years old from New Zealand, and she actually was the winner of this contest that we put together. And she said, I want a better future where leaders will stop talking and start acting, where we run with national resources and not against them. Don't we agree? You know, this is still a world where 1 billion people go to bed hungry every day, not knowing if they wake up the next day. This is still a world where every 6 seconds a child dies of hunger. This is still a world where 2.5 billion people don't have access to clean drinking water or basic sanitation. So we have our work cut out. But I believe that we can do it if we all work together. That is why I accepted the invitation of the Secretary General to be on the high-level panel for the post-2015 development goals. It's a unique opportunity to put moral standards together. Work for all, opportunities for all, dignity for all, food for all. That is a moral framework that hopefully we can unite the world with. But that's also why we announced a different way of doing business. Instead of operating under the ongoing principle, which is not bad, but the ongoing principle of how you can use society and the environment to be successful, why not change a little word and say, how can we operate whilst giving to society and the environment to be successful? A world that is already using more resources than it can replenish. Before 2 billion more people come in, we need to change the way we do things. I know it's not easy, but creating equitable and sustainable models or socially responsible capitalism, what anybody wants to call it, is an absolute must. Now, I don't believe, for that reason, that businesses themselves can be mere bystanders in the system that gives them life in the first place. We have to participate to find these solutions, especially at times when it's more and more difficult for politicians to take part in these global debates. Now, our premise is a very simple one. Our premise is that if we can grow our business by having these positive social impacts, more consumers will actually embrace us. And as more consumers embrace us, we will be able to grow and have more positive social impact. And that is that virtuous circle of growth that I think everybody aspires to. We're not doing that just because it makes business sense, but we're doing it because it simply is the right thing to do. It cannot be right, as I said, that 1 billion people go to bed hungry, that 1 in 3 children in the developing world are actually undernourished, or that 16,000 children die every day of hunger. And we're standing there watching it. You know, 16,000 days is the equivalent of 40 Boeing 747s full of children. What would we do if every day 40 Boeing 747s full of children came down? Why is that different? That is why we put emphasis in our programs of creating jobs for smallhold farmers. We're employing about 2 million of them. We want to employ another 500,000, because those are the people that go to bed hungry. That's why we work hard to reinforce our products with the right nutritional values. And that is why we actively work on the Global Task Force on Food Security for the G20. But equally, it cannot be right that 1 billion people have no access to safe drinking water, or the 2.5 billion to sanitation, or that still today 3,000 children under the age of 5 die every day from infectious diseases like diarrhea or pneumonia. By the way, those 3,000 children is another 8 Boeing 747s. At least half these deaths can be simply prevented by washing your hands with soap, as simple as that, or having safe drinking water. That's why under the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, we made a commitment to reach 1 billion people and improve their hygiene and well-being. Our Lifebuoy brand is exactly doing that with millions of people, especially in sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia. In fact, last Monday, we were in the UN in New York launching what is the Global Hand Washing Day. It's now in its 5th year. We have 100 countries participating, over 250 million people. We launched that with the Millennium Villages from Jeffrey Sachs, which is 80 villages in about 10 countries in Africa, trying to see if we concentrate on these villages, can we actually make the Millennium Development Goals come alive? A sort of a test market, so that we can see that we have this opportunity to make this a better world. Now we had a Facebook page, we had 1.5 million people pledging that they would help in schools and other activities to obviously drive the hand wash message. Tremendously powerful, tremendously simple. By the way, 97% of people have a soap of bar on hand, they simply don't use it. But if we can create that movement of change, yes, we do save lives. And you're aware of the power of social media and what it can do if you don't behave. Look at what Netflix tried to do in the US when they moved up their fees, or Bank of America, or look at organizations like change.org here in the US as a website. Or look at it on the positive side, that we have over 2 billion people now participating in Earth Day, turning off their lights for an hour and saving energy. Consumers are discovering the power of the web, the power to organize themselves, and the power to change. It is happening. It is happening right under our eyes. We're just not capitalizing on it enough. In June, we announced a partnership with Facebook, PSI, and Waterworks. And it's a very simple thing. Here again, we can look at Facebook at the social graph of the users. We're talking now about 1 billion users, by the way. And we can look at what it means to connect people with means to people in need. And we do that with water. And we get pledges from people to change, obviously, the situation for the ones that have not. And we're hoping that we can rally 1 billion people around that to provide that safe water and sanitation. Now, helping 1 billion people improve lives is a big target, I know that. And we as a company certainly have still a long way to go. That's why we work with lots of organizations and invite anybody in. Be it UNICEF, be it Save the Children, be it the World Food Programme, be it Oxfam, and many others. But we also need your help, very simple. We need your help to create that scale. Together, I believe that we can make capitalism a force for good, to have a positive connection between us who make the products and you and all the others who buy or can use the products. It's as simple as that. If we do that well, if we do it as a force for good, at mass scale, we truly can change people's lives. I want to show that big doesn't necessarily mean bad, and that it's not only small that is beautiful. I want to show, yes, that even big companies can be a force for change in this world. Take Ben & Jerry's, for example, one of our ice creams. I'm sure you like that stuff. They've championed their social and environmental causes since their beginning. And look at the impact that they have increasingly to get it in the mainstream culture. Take Dove with women's self-esteem. You know that even today, only 4% of the women think that they're beautiful, which is the biggest nonsense that exists. The inner beauty obviously being far more important. But you cannot switch on your computer or you get a message, have you done your nose today? What have you taken your buttocks? Look at your legs, do a belly tuck. So the Dove brand got a very simple idea, We let you change the banners, again with Facebook. We let you change these banners forever. You're a wonderful mom. Thanks for raising 2 wonderful kids. We love you for making such a wonderful meal. You simply look pretty. In 1 week time in 2 countries, we got 200 million impressions. That's the power of social media. People want that force of change for good. So every small choice that people make can be a big difference if you multiply that with a company like ours. We have 2 billion consumers using us every day. Individually, you might feel you cannot have a difference if it's sustainable Lipton or not. If I do it, my neighbor doesn't do it. But if you knew that you were 2 billion of you, you're a force for change. These small choices that might seem small, moving from a diluted detergent to a concentrated detergent, or buying this simple cup of tea or coffee from sustainably certified fair trade sources, do make a difference if you can multiply that by 2 billion. And you have that ability to help us do that. I actually have a very simple vision. We have about 20 brands that are 1 billion or more in turnover. I have a very simple vision, that any of these brands are obviously a force for good, that any of these brands are a force for fundamental change in society, but more importantly, that any of these brands have about 1 billion fans, each of them 1 billion fans on Facebook that help us, or any of the other social networks that help us drive that change. We currently as a company have 50 million people on Facebook. That's already an enormous force. In fact, on LinkedIn, we are the 5th most looked after company. How can we harness after the Googles or the Facebooks or the Microsoft, as you can imagine, they come number 1. But then being the first consumer good company and number 5. If you can harness that power to drive these changes, boy, we're up and running. We work with NGOs, we work with governments, but we need the combined strength and force of people like yourself that are in this room. 1 year ago, when I was talking to you in Zurich, you inspired me, definitely, with what you do and the energy that is represented in the room. I was impressed with the achievements of any of you. I just talked, before I came in, with Ayarat Bada, who has this wonderful mission of no war in the name of religion. And I talked to Erin Schroeder and others. Erin now she started working on her school bag program for Haiti when I met her, but she was now talking to me about her green challenge in schools, making sustainable living commonplace for everybody. So this green challenge are the type of things that, and she already has, by the way, millions of people following her, she was telling me. If we as companies with our 2 billion can amplify these green challenges, I'm convinced that we can have an impact into this world. So I'm inspired by you, but I'm also inspired by the many Unilever ambassadors that are here. I think we have about 40 in the audience itself. I don't want to name them all what they are doing, but increasingly they're getting their projects into our company. One of them is James Ingleby, who works in our R&D department. Now, James had a very simple idea. That is, how do we address the issue of sanitation? The billions of people that don't have toilets, that have to navigate in public with all the issues associated with that. He links it to our Domestos brand, an enormous brand as a force for hygiene and good, in my opinion. And he did some crowdsourcing with an organization called Open Ideo, a public-private partnership model, developing a low-cost in-home toilet. He calls it the Unilo. The Unilo provides jobs for the community, brings dignity to the people. He's now on his way to Nigeria and Ghana to roll this out and see if we can make it a sustainable model. I believe these things can be scaled up, and I believe that is the solution to give these 1 billion people access to sanitation. At last year's summit, we had many of our ambassadors there in the Unilever Sustainable Network. With this year's group and hopefully next year's group, I think we are getting critical mass even in a company like ours to galvanize that change that we need, because you simply get it. And we certainly will go out of the way to ensure that that voice is being heard. Our future, I believe, is quite literally in our hands, and it's down to all of us. So although the world faces enormous social and economic challenges, environmental challenges, I am actually very optimistic about the future. I am optimistic because your generation understands the need for sustainable living in a way that all the generations brought up during times of abundance don't. I am optimistic because your generation knows more than any other how to use this social media to create these cross-border communities, to connect people across the world as a force for good and change. I am optimistic because many of you are already having that enormous impact and taking that responsibility to drive these changes. In fact, I just saw a statistic that 18% of the college students in the United States now are applying for Teach for America. For the first time, more than applying for institutions like Goldman Sachs or Citi. You get it. You get it. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because of the sheer power of change represented in this room alone. You know how to harness the power to make positive things happen. Not just protest against the wrong things. Today, over half the population is below 30 years old. In some countries, that figure is more like 2/3. That gives me hope. There is a new, more entrepreneurial spirit today, without any doubt, amongst our young people. You in this room have the opportunity, but more importantly, you have the responsibility and the duty to be this catalyst for change. You all have the potential to be these leaders and to be these change makers. And many of you are already. I'd like to just end with a very simple phrase from George Bernard Shaw, the famous British playwright, who said, "Some people see the world as it is and ask, what can I do?" Young people like yourselves see the world as it could be and say, together we can. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. That's okay. How are you doing?